Last session of Eiteljorg. Thank you for coming. We're going to talk about purpose and authentic audience today. We wrote our slides up on the board. If you'd like to see the slides, if you have like a question burning that you don't ask it out loud, feel free to tweet at the hashtag.
If you can't get a word in edgewise,
Yeah, there's just so many people here.
Oh, okay. So my name is Wendy. I am currently the Director of Educational Technology at Shipley. I taught in Chicago for a number of years and then moved to the area. I started teaching at Shipley in 5th grade and now in ed tech. And I teach some English in the high school and some digital fabrication and a little bit of that.
And a clarification, she didn't teach from the moment she was in 5th grade. Her class was 5th grade.
Yes.
I'm Bethany Silva. I am the middle school technology coach. I teach coding, and I also teach teachers ways to use computers. And
I'm Raquel. I am one of the middle school Spanish teachers. And I've been at Shipley for 4 years, but I have close to 20 years of experience teaching.
I'm Chris Fornaro. This is my second year at Shipley. I am the chair of the STEAM department, and I run the makerspace at the upper school. I taught in middle school before this, and before that, I was in engineering. So we were gonna do a think fair share, but we didn't think there would be that many people. And thinking amongst educators is a little crazy. So how about at your tables, just pair out the chair. What is a time where the primary audience for your class's work wasn't just the teacher? So it wasn't just for you, it was for something else, whether it was for a peer, whether it was for the whole class, they were doing a presentation, maybe something outside of the class. What was that experience like for you and for your students? And then how did they get feedback? So was the feedback just coming from you? Was it coming from peers? How was the actual product interacted with? So why don't you take maybe 3 minutes and talk in one group, 2 groups, maybe?
Maybe we have a table here. Maybe everyone else can sort of join this table. Then we would be.
And then just hear a couple of ideas afterwards.
Okay, so fair warning, I just graduated college in the spring, so I'm just gonna come from a student perspective. It's easier. And there were a couple projects where the audience wasn't actually for the professor. We did stuff for the university as a whole. So I was in a social media class, and I had to, with a group, run a social media campaign for this big event that we put on the multicultural fair. So it wasn't even about us or the grade on the wall. It was really just about helping the people get the event known and things like that, even though it's a very popular event already. And then another one was a history class, and we were trying to do digital history. And so that audience again wasn't the professor. It was definitely more of our university community, because a lot of it dealt with the university's history or the greater Fredericksburg area history. So that was actually really cool, getting to do things that weren't just assignments that didn't seem to go anywhere.
How is your audience interacting with the creators of your work?
How's your audience interacting with the creators of? So I guess it was worded poorly. So whatever your students are creating, the audience of that, of whoever they're presenting for, how are they interacting? No, I'm confused by
the creators of their work, or were the creators of the work they're referring to?
I am a student. I created a work. Whoever I made that work for, how are they interacting with the student? So if they're writing a paper for you, are you giving them feedback? If they made a podcast for their class, are they hearing from the whole class? If they're
they created our work. Okay.
Sorry, poorly worded.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right? I'm
yeah.
Just want to make sure. All right, that's what I thought we meant too.
Yeah, got it.
All right. Maybe another 60 seconds.
So you use just one time.
Okay. Have you used it? I haven't used it by the way.
So what I did, we did a trip to the art museum, art, like, and now reaching that we saw is on the class where, and so they had to pick out 3 different pieces they liked on what basically what I did was like post something that was talking about each other, hashtags, you should also see the raw thing for the next year, and that we kind of more interactive, and then students can the new frontier write their comments as opposed to just they can respond to questions that you have. Just kind of generic things like this, you know, maybe change this. So there's but what I think is problematic is that because they only use it for that one project, so you have to like get them to log into the system. But I think it could be really and allows for the
You're here in Philly, right? The Barnes Foundation runs an outreach program that they behavior school to go to Barnes. It's like one of the art museums in Philly, and they have programming set up with first years. It's just like they give you supplies to work in your classroom, and they bring you into the Barnes and you like finish the projects there.
You've done the crash course design thinking activity from Stanford and lab, and they do a lot of partners and you're trying to
Yeah, another tool that you can use that's free. It's not quite as good as this, but it's called Sound Site AS, sort of like the night lab. Digital tools,
Maybe we can start wrapping up the share out.
Something that you can add in the sound. And like you just do it. You don't have to have an account. Well, you would have to like embed it into like blog posts and then you would be able to comment on it. So it's not like quite as elaborate, but it would just be like a sounds site
So let's bring it back in. And do we have anyone who wants to share out maybe a project or an assignment where the audience was a teacher, a group, something bigger? Who wants to take the brave step? Nobody wants to share out? Yeah.
Wait, what are we sharing?
Share out like a project or something that you did where there was an audience of something. Like what do they do and how do they interact?
Okay, so I can share. Well, I'm not a teacher actually. I'm an instructional technology specialist at the University of Mary Washington, but I was very recently a student, like spring. I was a student. So some of the projects that I got to do, and I know this is like on the higher ed level, but I did some in high school as well, that the audience was the community. So it was either like the high school or the like local community or the university community. So like we did a social media campaign for an event that was happening on campus that is actually like a big event within the community as well. So we like ran the whole social media like event and campaign for them. And that was like one project that got us kind of like involved with the community and the school, but then also like learning about social media and things like that. So that was, and we didn't, like we turned it in, but we didn't really need to turn it in because our professor could just kind of monitor what was going on online.
Awesome.
I think it's interesting that you say like we turned it in, but we didn't really need to like that. With that, that became so much not the point. You already had gotten the feedback you needed from, were you getting retweets or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
social media reach you were.
Anybody else? Yep.
So we're in higher ed, but we do projects in our classes where, students blog as part of the class, but one of the things they do is a learning project where they have to learn whatever they want, but they have to blog the process of learning online, and they do it openly, and they connect sometimes with people actually in
And so I was interviewing one of my students. My other cat is that I'm getting a dissertation, or not getting a dissertation, getting a doctorate in education. And my dissertation is on the writing habits of students as they write in Independence National Historical Park. And as they publish that work digitally, what does it look like what does that do to their writing process? And so I was asking one of the students about a time that she might have written something that she felt was really good. And I asked her, why was it really good? And this is what she said. I got an A, so I'm guessing it was good. And that was it. That was her full dig into what it was that she wrote. And so I really wanted to see a little bit more about that. And as Wendy and I have both switched over from English language arts into more project-based learning with the technology aspect of our lives, we realized that we were thinking both about audience, because audience is a massive part of the writing process, and then we were also thinking about purpose, because purpose is an incredibly big part of project-based learning, and we were really interested in looking through our classrooms at how that plays out if we're trying to do both across those two fields. So just as far as audience go, people write to share, whether with themselves or others. Writers need audiences to respond to their messages. The response confirms for the writer that the text fits his or her intentions. And that's from Donald Graves. But when I went and asked a student, I got that same idea. I really loved having both blogs. Just knowing that my work was going out there and that people were reading it, that was really motivating. And then as far as purpose goes, Wolk, who is a big proponent of project-based learning, said, when children are allowed to choose what to explore, they become intrinsically motivated, more than happy to work hard and strive for the highest quality. And then in one of my study halls, I was talking to a student, and she said, oh, we want to do assignments more when teachers give us more options and control. I did so much more in my project because I was interested in it. So there was a purpose to her work. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at here is across that line of audience and purpose and where they might intermix. So we're each going to share one to two actually of our things that we've done in our classrooms or outside of our classrooms to talk about the ways the audience and purpose have intersected.
Oh, okay. So one of the first things I used to be a fifth grade teacher, and I started using a blog with my class, and the audience was nothing bigger than the classroom. But what I found was by asking students to respond to, and I was very directed by me. I'm not going to pretend like it was really student driven. But I found that the level of conversation, these are similar questions that I would ask people on paper, but now it was public. Their classmates were seeing the questions. I asked better questions because they had to be questions that 17 people could answer and not all say, 7, and the first person answers it and it's done. So I asked better questions. The students thought about it more. They were spending time on something, and then our conversations in class started, 3 steps beyond where we used to sort of be able to start. We didn't have to do the summary, the review, the whatever else. And over the course of the year, I turned over running those discussions to the students. So as we got to short stories, then you would be in charge of this story, you were in this one, and this one, this one, and you, after having watched this sort of happen as a participant, you now took over running the discussion and being the leader. And so having that audience, even on the small scale, I found to be really powerful for my fifth graders. And so as I moved to upper school, I really wanted to have a space for some of that, but my high school students really were not a fan of like the little assignment and like having to post little stuff all the time. And I wanted to do some more creative writing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to we're going to have a Podbean, a podcasting, location. I'm going to share their podcasts, and and then I thought that I had gotten some other classes ready to listen. That sort of fell through. So we had content, and we didn't really have an audience, and I couldn't really generate an audience. However, I still felt like the work was good. The students were interested in it because it potentially had an audience. So I am now second semester. I have a new group of kids. I have sort of tweaked the idea of how are we going to share out some work. And I think for this, they really needed feedback, and they really needed to know that an audience was there. And it didn't work because it didn't do all that I wanted to, because I couldn't really prove that there was an audience. We could see that there were some listens, but the commenting didn't work the way I wanted it to, and so,
But the students were really excited about it. Like, we share a lot of the same kids.
Yeah.
And even was walking by in the hallways, and they were recording their podcasts in the halls, or they came to math class, and like I knew that they were doing podcasts, so I asked them about them, and like they were genuinely excited, like more so than tell me about your English paper. Like it was something that they were looking forward to doing.
yeah. So I feel like I sort of needed to give it more time. I needed to be able to help with that audience piece, but that it was a good enough project to sort of keep going and try version 2, which I'm starting this semester. And then Bethany and I teach a little activity to middle school that we call it mini makers. And so we wanted them to have an audience for little projects that they're doing. That sort of, it means not even really once a week.
Like a rotation, so once every 7 days, I suppose.
So we have a 7-day rotation, so it means one time in 7 days. So we decided that we made a Shipley Makers Twitter account that we all use for various makerspace projects, and we would tweet with sort of hashtag their name and makerette. And we actually have found an audience, and we get some retweets, and people seem to see the tweets, but the kids actually don't care. So because they have purpose in their own making, like they know who they're making it for, and they're making, some of them are making little cards that light up, and they're making it for their friends, or they're making such and such thing with their friends who are in the room. So it's interesting, like here we found an audience, but we actually didn't need to find them an audience, it turned out.
Which, well, and actually the reason that we started looking at an audience and started thinking about, okay, well, a lot of the maker work focuses on having that authentic purpose. We want students to have a purpose and they'll want to be making. And what we found was our kids would walk into the room and be like, it's mini courses, whatever. And we had some kids who would bring a project to completion, but we had a lot of kids who would just kind of fizzle out. We thought, oh, what if we add audience, and will that help them make it through their project? And so in our first iteration, we weren't tweeting things out. In our second iteration, we weren't tweeting things out. In our third iteration, we were tweeting things out. And they were like, oh, that's okay. And now in our fourth iteration of it, we're tweeting things out, but for some reason, we've also managed to have them feel like their projects are purposeful without the audience. So the intersection there is even.
Right, but I think it's nice, the audience that we are sort of generating for ourselves as makers and trying to sort of get our little makerspace, our sort of smaller and bigger makerspaces going, but the audience is actually our audience and not the kids' audience, because they don't control the Twitter account. And because we see them so infrequently, getting that feedback to them in any sort of timely fashion, by the time we see them again, I have to say, like, I have completely forgotten that, I should tell them that, somebody retweeted that we tweet with, Chibitronics, because we use their products to make these little cards. And so they liked it or retweeted it. The moment has passed. So anyway, I think my examples are more like in process sort of examples of, I really feel that having this purpose or having this audience is going to be powerful for a project that has some interest already. If I can get some more audience, I think I will get more buy-in from the students. And here we sort of were trying to do two things at once and realized that the audience we got was our audience, not theirs. So anyway.
So this is.
I have a plan.
Oh.
Thank you
Well,
so
go ahead,
much.
take your plan.
So this is my outside of Shipley work, and to give a little context, the summer camp that I run is a 2-week summer camp through the Philadelphia Writing Project, and I absolutely put a link there for anyone who has Philadelphia area students who might be interested in going. It's for students entering 9th through 12th grade. And they generally go to Philadelphia public schools, and some of them go to schools in the surrounding area. But as I was starting the camp with my co-creators of the camp, we were thinking about all the different ways we could incorporate an audience into the students' lives. And so we started with daily writing celebrations. And so the students at the very beginning of the week have to sign up for when they're going to read just to the class. Then we make that even bigger by, at the end of the first week, they have to do a reading at People's Plaza, which this is a picture of what it looks like, and that's the Liberty Bell. And these are all the people who contribute, whether they're watching you or not. So you can imagine to a high schooler who is afraid of sharing their work with a small group, how intense this experience can be. Then we also have our independent, then we also have our online ways of sharing out to an audience. We have our Independence National Historical Park blog, and that is I thought I put a link to it in there. I apologize that I didn't, but I'll go back in and change that later. But that blog is run by the National Park Service, and so some of the downsides of it are that the students can't publish their own work on it. It has to be posted by a ranger, and that they don't get alerts about who might have commented on their work. The upside of it is it's run by the National Park Service, so it's on this very formal page, and it's very published, and it gets a lot of hits because so many people are making their way through the National Parks page. And so they actually get a ton of comments on it. Our first summer, we had a student whose essay on Thomas Jefferson's role as a slave owner, and also the person who wrote All Men Are Created Equal, his essay was picked up by an actor who portrayed Thomas Jefferson and has a bajillion Twitter followers who tweeted it out, and then he got tons and tons of comments, and suddenly everybody was writing really intensely.
I think that's an interesting point, that not everyone needs to get feedback in the class. If somebody gets really exciting feedback like that in the group, it kind of spurs everybody. So I had a similar experience in my 5th grade of something that was published more widely, and we had one person got a comment from somebody who works for Time magazine. And all of a sudden, everybody was motivated, even though only one person out of the class had gotten the comment.
So the way that we make sure that everybody is doing that is, again, every single student signs up for their day that they're going to post something to it, and then I go around hunting them down, getting it done. The second year that I ran it, we created this class wiki because we realized that a place where the students were able to spread out to a broad audience might not be the only place we wanted to have more audience, and we wanted them to be able to interact online when they went home and not have it just be their in-person work. And so we created a class wiki, and that was successful because I made it a homework assignment. But the third year that we did it, I just clicked on the complete little wrong computer. It's the problem with having too many. Oh, nope, forgot. There. So the third year that we ran it, we actually decided to go out to the Youth Voices writing community and engage with that community instead. And the link is on there, and it's an amazing community run by teachers, and it has all of these missions that students can take part in, and other students are reading your students' work, and they're all talking to each other. And then we also piloted the Write for Change platform, which is social media that's focused on, social network that's focused on writing that has a social justice component. And because we were piloting it, it became our social media site. And so we realized that going into the 4th year of this, we're actually going to find a way to have our own social media site that then pushes out to Youth Voices and a more widely published blog.
Okay, so I'm coming for this as the perspective of a Spanish teacher, and my job is to try to find things that the kids will really be able to talk about in the target language. And so I'm always trying to find things that will motivate them. And something 8 years ago when I was teaching 6th grade, I discovered that interpreting a piece of art is a great way to motivate students, especially I teach middle school, so beginning students to talk about what they see in the painting. If you have a portrait by Frida Kahlo, you can talk about her physical characteristics, you can talk about the emotions, and etc. But 2 years ago, Shipley sent me to Salamanca, Spain, and I had the privilege of taking a workshop for language teachers specifically on technology. And they introduced me to an application that made me sort of rethink how I would do this project that I was always doing with students. And so I'm going, are you familiar with ThingLink? One person is, okay, so, but raise your hand if you're, only one person is, okay, so I'm going to take you just for briefly so that you can see an explanation of what ThingLink is, because it really made me sort of reflect about what I was doing in the classroom and sort of rework my project.
Think ThingLink. Have you ever watched a student use a website for the first time? They don't just read the text presented to them and stop. They explore the site. Truly, this is what we want our students to do. Find out everything they can about a topic from trusted sources. When you have a lesson that should lead students to particular things to explore, ThingLink is exactly what you need. ThingLink.com is a free website that allows you to turn an image into a source of embedded links that enhance the information presented through the image. First, let's see how ThingLink works, and then we'll see a number of different ways to use it in the classroom. To use ThingLink, you simply create an account, which requires only an email address and a password, and then choose your image. Make sure that if you choose an image from the internet, that it is legal to use. For instance, this image is from the Library of Congress. Another good source is the Wikimedia Commons site, which has a wealth of public domain media to use. Once you have chosen your image, you can begin tagging it with relevant information. All you have to do is click on the portion of the image you would like to display the information, change the size and location as necessary, and then enter the information you would like to display. In addition to just typing text and adding links to websites, you can record audio to accompany the link to a site, video, map, etc. You can make as many tags on an image as you'd like. Once you are finished tagging the image, save and share it. Choose your method or just use the actual link at the bottom. You can also choose to embed it on a blog or website by copying and pasting the HTML. This way, kids can either come to the actual site to see the image, or they can just use it through your blog or website.
So when I saw this, it made me sort of rethink my project, and I thought, well, what if I were to, the students could still interpret a piece of art, but what would happen if I were to use this application? And so with the help of Bethany last year, I reworked the project and back to
And just like the interface of that alone, it looks just like Facebook when you're tagging your friends. So it's something like a skill that students already have and they're already using, but now they're taking that skill and they're making it into like an educational artifact.
right, exactly. And so I reworked the project a little bit. So let's say in a class of 20, I divided the kids up into groups of 4. And then I gave them, and I put this on my on the Blend space where you can find the videos and things like that. I gave them a list of like, let's say 30 artists, Spanish artists, Latin American artists, Hispanic American artists. And I let them choose as a group their top 5 artists that they would be interested in perhaps learning more about and presenting. And once they did that, they were given a full rotation to create their ThingLink. And I have some examples of here. I've chosen this group's presentation in particular because I myself was not familiar with this artist, Xavier Cortada, and talk about, well, there was a child that would introduce the artist, and then the other children would introduce a piece of work from that artist. After that presentation, I was amazed that my 8th grade middle school students had taught me something. I learned so much from their presentation, and it was a moment to me that was wow, we're always talking about letting the students take over, and it was really transformative for me. And so if you look at the link here, something that I discovered is that because they were able to tag, and it's similar to Facebook, they really delved into the presentation. They really researched more, and it's this whole idea of purpose, right? They were more excited and more engaged. And I'm going to now skip over to this presentation. Now, this is a beginning student. He only had Spanish in 7th grade, and so you can see
la pintura es mi favorito de Javier Cortada porque es muy creativo y diferente. La pintura es de Miami y fue pintada en 2004. Me gusta la pintura porque mi color favorito es verde y tiene mucho verde y rojo y un poco amarillo y azul. Los colores son vivos. En el parte de arriba tiene un verde cara. En la parte de abajo tiene un verde hacha. Hacha es axe en inglés. No sé. Y Javier es parte de un grupo que se llama The Reclamation Project. El grupo pinta muchas pinturas de manglares en Miami.
¿Y qué son manglares en inglés?
Oh, manglares es mangroves.
Oh.
Sí, es.
Wendy just reminded you probably don't know what he's saying. Well, you do. You understand what he's saying. For a beginning Spanish student, the project no longer became just about describing what was in the painting. As you can see, because he was able to tag, he was much more interested, much more involved, and they were just more engaged, I found. And so we're currently doing the project now with the 8th graders, and something that I'm thinking about, with this whole idea of audience, is that these things maybe can be tweeted. I don't know, what would happen if one were to tweet it, but it's something to consider.
So I'm very fortunate that I get to teach an engineering course at Shipley, and in the engineering course, we do lots of little design projects throughout the year, and the culminating project is making a Rube Goldberg machine. So before I even tell you, I'm going to show you the winner from last year. Yeah. So their whole goal was to erase a whiteboard in at least 20 steps. So you see lots of just random things. Some of them were picked up from yard sales, some of them were toys. So they had 19 of the 20 steps work. And they had to make a whimsical story to go along with it. If you were ever interested in doing something like this, Rube Goldberg's family puts out this contest every year, and there's a contest all over the country. But this is something that the purpose of this project was to really get them to come together and work in a group. But it turned into a huge audience where I was only expecting them to share out with each other. And it turned out on the day of the competition, I had probably between 3 and 6 classes asking if they could come down to watch it because the engineering students have been talking about it for so long. So we recorded them all, we put them all on YouTube. Their families viewed them a bunch, but it was such a weird project in the sense that I didn't think it was going to become that. I thought it was just going to be within our domain, and it turned into a thing where other teachers were coming to see it, students were talking about it. We took up we had a room like this, and the entire back of the room was filled with these gigantic projects. And SLA is doing the same kind of thing out here where they have this Rube Goldberg right out front. If you leave this classroom, just check it out. This is a good project that just draws in lots of different people, lots of different ideas, and there's tons of different things you can, like directions that you can go with it.
I think it's interesting to think about how many of our examples we've had surprise audiences, or an audience comes from an unexpected place, or the thing that we thought was going to generate an audience didn't, but something else did.
Yeah, things work in weird ways sometimes.
Either that or we're just all really bad guessers.
I forgot to mention with the Xavier for Talent presentation, one of the students ended up meeting the artist during their winter break. So that came as a surprise again to me. Like yeah, there are all these surprises.
For the engineering midterm for the past 2 years, we've had the students create design projects, like little things, like egg drop challenges, or building like popsicle stick aqueducts was another one. But instead of just like creating their own design challenge, they have to create it and they have to go teach it to a group of 6th graders. So they have a half hour to go down to the middle school, and they have to bring all of their equipment. They have to teach the students like what the quick concept they're trying to take away is, and then the 6th graders actually create it, and they have to judge an eventual winner for the design challenge, like the engineering students. And then they record it and they reflect on their process as teachers, like where they went wrong, how they could have improved their design project. And this is one where like the purpose and the audience like has had a bigger scope, and lots of people will come down to see the 6th graders participate within these design challenges. And the engineering students always come at it as like, this is going to be really easy, until like I send them home over Thanksgiving break and I tell them to practice it with their little cousins, and then their little cousins are like inevitably find like a way to like make it go haywire, and they come back and they're like, I need to rethink this. Like I need to rethink this quickly because we're doing it in a week. So the engineering midterm has been like a great project for both the engineering students and the 6th graders to like kind of have a purpose and audience like across schools even. So with that.
So one of the things we want to think about is this continuum of bigger and bigger audience, or purpose, either one. And what we don't want anyone to take away from this is to think that everything belongs here, that everything that our individual goals as teachers are not to get everything that we do having this audience, but that over the course of a year or a semester, how are we mixing it up? Which things are we thinking intentionally about, activities in our class that really only have ourselves as teachers as the audience, because it's personal skill development or whatever it is that we need to check in with the student. Are we being intentional about when another peer would be helpful, where in a small group of class, and are we having something where we really feel like there is that bigger audience, so that we're not doing the same thing all the time, but that we have a mix, sort of
Just like assessments.
a balanced audience for the year. So we talk about this with assessment too, and my sort of thing is we should have a balanced assessment diet over the course of your semester or year-long course. I think the same thing goes for audience. So that's kind of what we're looking for, or looking to think about. So we wanted to spend some time, and since we clearly don't need to break up into groups, we wanted to spend some time thinking about this idea of an audience, and if there were some things that we do individually in our classrooms that are screaming out for a bigger audience or a bigger purpose, and if we can sort of help each other with that process. Does anyone have any questions about any of the things that we have individually been working on before we sort of get going on that? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So, do you ever, with the, when you treat out students, or tag them, and will that show them when it's getting like
We use we hashtag their names. These are 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So there is the question of they're under 13, a lot of them, and so we can't necessarily, like, we put a picture a lot of times of them doing whatever it is they're doing and use a first name, but many of them don't have Twitter accounts to actually tag them to, or to tweet at them directly. So
Although they mostly do have Instagram accounts, we didn't want to go into Instagram because so many of them.
Ari Hayden, please report to the Eiteljorg senior check. Ari Hayden, thank you.
They're not technically supposed to have them, and so we didn't want to. We didn't feel like it was appropriate for us to engage with them.
a lot of them are under 13, like terms of service says 13. Like we know that they're doing that, but as school people, I'm not sure we can.
For the upper school students?
For upper school, totally can.
I don't really want to tweet to students because I don't want them to think I'm ever looking at their Twitter account, but I share out the Twitter handle and I ask them to follow, like they can follow me, but I won't follow you back. And some of my engineering students have made 3D designs. For example, one of them, a student made the Philadelphia Flyers like logo, and I tweeted it to the Flyers, and then the Flyers retweeted it, and like he saw that it got retweeted, and he was like super excited about it, and like it kept the project going for the rest of the students as well. But it's that fair balance of like how personal do you get with social media with your students, which I think is like something that a lot of us probably struggle with. Did you have
Someone else had a hand.
Yeah. None of you specifically talked about this, but I don't know if any of you do it. That you talked about having an audience being very motivating for students, and I've seen that too. Do any of you have that audience be evaluative at all, or is it more just like having them step up their game and do better work?
Yeah.
Evaluated in the sense of, okay, we're doing an assessment and now we've, like, so you did a blog post and we're letting people, with the Project Bright folks, the people were not just nice. Like sometimes people were like, well, why are you saying that? I don't like that you're saying that about Thomas Jefferson. Yes, you enslaved, but you're negating everything else that we did. And or another student had people, she wrote a first person poem that people assumed was written about herself, and she felt like she had written it about a fictional character, and people were really concerned about her and her welfare because of it. And because sometimes teenage poems can be dramatic. And when people didn't understand her point, she completely revised the poem. So although they weren't assessing her formally or any part of her grading practice, they're not understanding what she was doing.
I did ask my students who did the podcasting, at some point they listened to each other's and filled out a little survey about sort of positive, negative, general sort of commentary that I gave to people a little bit, but generally I personally haven't asked the wider audience for critique so much as feedback.
For the Ruben Goldberg project, I had different teachers coming in like that I knew were coming in ahead of time, and there was like a rubric that we had to evaluate them, but we really wanted to focus in on the storytelling aspect because not all the teachers had like the engineering background to like know how many simple machines were going on, but they all had to tell a story beforehand. So like that group that you saw, they had like the Avengers like having to kill whoever the bad guy in the Avengers is. I don't know his name, I forget. But like, and then another group was SpongeBob and like how SpongeBob was trying to escape from his coconut house. So we talked as teachers to figure out like which one was like the most whimsical of stories.
Cool. So
I go forward one.
So we just thought this would give everyone else a chance to spend some time thinking about and take advantage of the wisdom of the room of what do you do in your class that you think is there work that, you know, just one little tweak and, oh, we could have other people reading this work, do you know, or seeing this work. Is there work that you do already that you think, wow, this is really just waiting for an audience, and could the group help you think about that? Because I think one of the things to also consider is how much time are you taking to sort of maintain all of this? So I did try with my 5th grade a number of years blogs that were more public, but because they were 5th graders, it required me to approve everything, and the platform I chose didn't notify me when they had things that they had submitted. And it sounds stupid, but like the number of clicks for me to get through each person to see, did you have something that was pending, became it just killed the whole thing. And that's probably just about how much time I could, you know, devote to that over the course of, you know, all the other things I had to do. So I just thought we could all sort of brainstorm for each other how to get work out or how to tweak a unit project, something that would produce work that you would want to share if you don't feel like you have something you want to share currently. Does anyone want to be guinea pig? You look like you do.
I think I've done blogging with kids, and
the most successful year was when we were paired up with other schools. And it was through quad blogging, which seems to not be a thing anymore. I can't really figure that out. It must, not enough people must have kept up with it, but that was ongoing enough that they maintained, they checked their comments, they responded. It was actually 4 years ago, the last election year, we were paired up, we're in Maryland with a group of kids in Iowa, and that was fascinating because it was a really different political conversation. So I think that if you can build something with another class somewhere else, that can be helpful because it isn't quite as random. You know, then teachers, you can, as a teacher, you can say, okay, we got 20 kids blogs here. Everybody needs to, somebody needs to comment on everybody. So you can kind of maintain that a little bit so everyone gets an audience and it's not just the one kid who gets the hit.
Something I've done in the past is I've taken the Twitter, so like whatever subject I'm looking to like interact with other classes about, like hashtag that and like ask if there's teachers that are interested. And like I get so many people who are like too many people who are interested to the point where like I can't even keep up with it.
Yeah, I mean I think that can be a really effective way to get kids to be more purposeful and thoughtful about what they are going to say because someone else is going to read it, but also have there be some payoff for the kids.
What grade students do you
have? It's 10th and 11th, 10th and 12th.
Oh, okay.
It's up to high school.
If the Youth Voices platform is great because it's already a ready-made community and it's worth checking out. It was on the slide.
Go back to
Okay. Yeah. The link to it is there. It's
Youth Voices.
Yes, and I have to say it's not as slick as maybe Blogger would be, and you end up having to add your students in a lot on your, like there's a little bit more background work you have to do to start, but because there are already so many teachers in there, it's very active every day, and so it's a nice way to jump into everybody named already.
And I think that's what's interesting about a couple of those, and Right for Change too, is there is that sort of ready-made community and the New York Times like teaching and learning issues thing too, so that you're not having to generate the topics, the interest, the community, all of it, that you can take advantage of some things that are already up and running.
Yeah. Paul Allison actually, who is one of the co-creators of it, has been here this whole weekend, and so he would actually be really excited that I was just like, we should do this.
Okay.
But my students really enjoyed that, and they actually, the teachers who belong to it all have a rule that you have to do you have to comment on 3 different people's posts before you post anything of your own, and which also really helps with people getting comments on it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Other people thinking projects, have projects. So what's
keeping people from, like I know I don't find an audience for my students' work as much as I would like to. What are some of the things that, and some of it, what keeps me from doing it is time. And just, well, this is already established that I know I'm supposed to, my department, I'm not in charge of the English department. My department says this has to happen, so how am I gonna fit this in? And for me, I have a tendency to bite off bigger projects than I probably should initially and do myself a little bit and make it too big as opposed to starting at a size that is reasonable. So I will just put that out there. But what are some things that you all think are sort of getting in the way of finding an audience or providing a way for students to share beyond your classroom?
So I think, so since I work with faculty, I think what happens a lot of times is that it's really hard to do these kinds of like projects solo, unless like you've done it before or there is that like established audience or community already. And so I feel like collaborating with like either another teacher or even trying to get the whole department to collaborate would be really beneficial, because then at least the department could be, and like all of the classes in that could be the audience, and you're kind of establishing a community then. Because I know like in like some of the professors at least, if they're not using the university community as the audience, it typically is the class. But recently they've been trying to do things where the department will get in on it. And even if the faculty members disagree on like how the project, works and like how the assignment is like written out and things like that, at least they're all kind of supportive in the fact that they're trying to create that. So that's just something that I've observed often there.
And so maybe that's something that we all could sort of think about being that colleague for each other a little bit. If sort of if there's someone in here who does teach us something similar where you feel like, great, that would be an audience for my students' work. I think thinking about audience beyond, like if the colleagues at your school are not interested, then who else can become your colleague in that situation? I'm just putting some little notes in there. That's
You
what
said time, but timing also. I've been going back and forth with a couple different teachers and we're trying to get our classes to
I
work
know.
together on things, but we're just a little bit off.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, but I have to do this week, but next week we're gonna be doing that. No, but we're gonna be, it's really hard to sync things up without completely upending your students. And that can be, it's a double-edged sword because maybe they can be flexible, but other times that can really mess with your curriculum. If you're like, okay, forget this, we're gonna go back to this over here, and it's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? So I think timing can also be challenging in terms of having that audience sort of at the right place at the right time.
I think another challenge is, well, we were talking before how like if one student's work takes off, it can motivate other people, but then you also have some students who never get found, and then that can be like personally like isolating. Like I remember one time, because my English teacher has to put our essays on SLA's website, like on our own pages of that, and then we're supposed to comment on each other's. And I remember one of my friends got 0 comments, and she was, for the rest of the day, she just felt bad about it. And it can happen, it can be very discouraging for that individual who, if everyone else in the class is getting comments, and if they don't,
Take it personally.
Right, we certainly don't want to create another social media platform where people are feeling bad about themselves for the number of likes and comments they're not getting.
We had some weeks that we actually addressed that with Project Right. We wanted to make sure everybody's piece got commented on. And so one way that we did it was, since I'm a member of the Philadelphia Writing Project, we sent out a sign-up genius to all of the teacher consultants in the Philadelphia Writing Project and asked them during these 2 weeks when we're blogging, could you please go through and compose on every kid's comment during this one day, right? So like no one teacher is ever doing every single post, and it helped to alleviate a little bit of that. We also, it was interesting because our students weren't commenting on each other on the big national park blog, but so we had to make sure that adults were spreading the love, because there were some that were wonderful adults found really provocative and wanted to comment on, and there were some that people didn't want to, like that people just weren't interested in. So we actually had to kind of find ways to push adults, and then also I would be like, hey mom, could you please comment on this post that has absolutely nothing on it? Thank you so much. And sometimes I would have to work with neighbors out there too. So 2 weeks together, call your parents and choose on
I think to go back to the timing thing, like I tried to sort of get that set up in advance, because in the moment I know we're going to end up off kilter, and to no avail. So I totally agree on that one, and I'm trying to think, are there particular times in the year that are like good ones, that are sort of natural break points where people are starting something new and therefore could push that like 2 days later, like after a break or after a holiday sort of time, have you got an end before that and then starting something new so you could push back? So I'm usually trying to think about the calendar too, to see what would work there.
I was just thinking of when you said the time. Sometimes it really depends on the school, but usually there's like a day or two right after the grades go in, where it's like the teachers are done grading, the students have handed in all their work, and it's just like about to start something new, but haven't yet. It's like that. It's not like we don't have any work, but it's like it's kind of gone down a little bit.
Right, so where are those moments in the calendar where there is a little breathing space, and how can I sort of arrange things and make sure there's something that's a time that I can maybe connect with people, but like I'm busy doing comments.
Then your calendar has to line up with other
Right.
people's.
Yeah.
Right.
At those moments.
Yeah.
Another big thing with timing, I think that trying to figure out how to do this in like two or three things that you're doing is too much. Like pick one thing per year and make that one thing really, really good so that you have that for next year. And then the following year, make one more thing really good. And then, I mean, it's like a 3 to 5 year process before you have like where you want the entire class to be.
Sometimes it's like, it just, it doesn't always work that way because people's classes change. And you can, I mean, I had this great collaboration with the school in Oregon. It was great. Everything were Skyping. We had this magical year where everything came together. And then the next year it's like, yeah, no, I'm sorry. It's a semester course now. We're not doing this. And so the idea that things are, I think it's just kind of, it's such a moving.
Yeah, I had, when I was doing 5th grade, I did this one survey unit when I had all the kids coming to my room for math briefly for a few weeks. And so they had all done little surveys and wrote these graphs, but they were all really sort of stupid questions. But we had a school-wide kind of thing that the head of lower school had some research she wanted us to do that gave us a real purpose. And the kids were so excited, and it was completely crazy because all 3 sections were working on the same thing. And so I never knew where we were going to be when the next group came in. And it was just like a list on the board of things that needed to get done, and we just crossed them off. And when you came in, you looked at what wasn't crossed off. But I couldn't recreate it the next year because we didn't have that.
Because it was a one-time.
It was a one-time thing, and that purpose had been served and disappeared. And
so maybe you just have to be open to as many opportunities as possible. Just take whichever one really works for a particular year and not continue to try to.
Mm-hmm. I think there's sort of two.
Also surprised by all the different options that effective versus the ones that haven't been, that need for openness to change, because some kids are interested in one group of students really interested in one thing, and you can go as far as you want to with it, and another group of students the next year will say, not so much. Yeah, and you have to find the new thing that they're passionate about.
I think there's sort of 2 parts to the piece is being comfortable with the sharing, with the technicalities of how do I do that. Are you a Twitter person? Are you a blog person? Are you a whatever platform you kind of think is going to work for you, and getting the kinks out of how that's going to work. And then there's the project itself and the content that's going to be there. And so there's both things to sort of move forward so that you have some technical options at your fingertips, so that when that work arises or the project is ready, you're not then having to learn the technical piece at the same time, because I think both of those things can be tricky.
I think you can always probably create opportunities for the sharing within the class or with another section in your school, and then if the opportunity arises in a particular year for the larger connection, you can jump on it. But maybe some years it's just good enough for students to read and comment on each other's posts in a class because that's what you can do, but they're still getting the public experience of blogging as opposed to writing for just a teacher. And then, maybe some years you'll connect with somebody else who's doing something similar or get an idea, but.
And some years you'll have those classes where like they can't even share with each other. Like it's just going to be them sharing with you.
Yeah, but if there's a sliding scale where this is what we're going to do, and we'll see how far we get with it, and just some years will be different. Some classes.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I'm saying like go ahead, and I would call you by name if I knew your name.
Miriam.
Hi, Miriam.
So I just thought of another challenge that sometimes arises. So when students are working on things that are being posted online, I know of my own work sometimes when it's something specifically for a class and you do it ongoing and then you move on from that class the next year, like I think making it so students don't feel like they're getting cut off too, like finding a way for them to continue it if they want to. Because there was something I did my freshman year and it just seemed like it ended as soon as the school year ended, and then there was
websites where I created from scratch and then I just kept working on it afterwards. Just making the students feel like this is something they can continue to contribute to if they have the interest.
Does the SAT program here help you with that? Like, where you can go back and like student teach in a class?
Not with that particular problem, because it was more like because we were all split into different streams and like it was mostly student run, but because we weren't all getting together in the same class anymore, it just made it more difficult. And we tried to run it as a club, but it wasn't working. We were doing a semester of service, like we were trying to make it into like another service club. It didn't work out because we were all split up.
If you know my work, then you know that I try to do a lot of this, and I really like the idea of authentic learning. But I think we've equated, for the most part of this conversation, and a much greater conversation, we often connect authentic audience with external audience. And I've heard the term, and we use the term a lot, just a teacher, or that sort of idea that that we're not the primary authentic audience for students. I think we have I think there's some dangers in that, and I think in terms of why students write in the first place, whether they'll ever be able to find an authentic audience for their particular work, how do we also, while we do this, also instill that particular, whether it's a love for writing, whether it's a love for being able to create, whether anyone's reading or not. Because I find a lot of students, some of them are the ones that are the connectors, and they all have those social abilities that allow them to connect. They're fantastic connectors, but it's some of the other ones that I don't think will get there, or have more difficulty getting there. So how do we instill in those some of those perhaps more traditional views on that it's good enough just to write, it's good enough just to create and write, whether there's an external audience or not. So I think that should also be part of that conversation when we're thinking about the term authentic audience. We disvalue or we take away value from our own power of teacher in being that primary authentic audience that matters as much as an external audience. So always that fleeting, perhaps not fleeting, that our search for someone that's more of an expert than us, I guess. And I think we have to continue to reflect on ourselves and what we can provide, how we can provide value to our students.
Do you feel like when your students create blogs for your classes and then they're done with it? And they don't pick it up again?
Sometimes some continue on for a long time.
Right.
And it's those, when that student finds that voice and they're inspired, and as you mentioned before, the rest of the classroom is inspired, that works for a while, but it's almost like a drug effect in some ways, that eventually they come down. If they don't get that sort of thing again, they're disappointed. I ran into a student a while ago who jumped off his house or something and got like millions of YouTube hits. And so that was his thing. Now, how am I going to ever do that again? It was sort of like, how dangerous do I have to go to actually get the million hits again? And he never found that million hits. It was a bit of a fluke. And so it's sort of like, how do I, because there's a bit of a high, I guess, in some ways, in actually getting your work read. I mean, there's that euphoria. So how do we actually sort of flatline that need to, that experience, I guess, so that they feel good enough to write, and that what they're writing, even if it's not read. I mean, that's the legacy of any famous authors. I mean, authors who get their first book well received, and the next two or three are duds. That's the way it goes. Sometimes your audience just dissipates, changes, and I think we have to prepare students for those particular circumstances. Another part, I think, unrelated, is there's certainly a lot of skill in helping to, or a lot of one of the things that we really try to focus on when we get students to write is those social pieces. There's some simple things like, are you getting your audience to ask questions, or how are you actually writing to receive feedback in an authentic way? And I think that's a really important piece in terms of how they write it. And again, some people do this very well. Some of our students do this very well. But I worry sometimes, even thinking about introversion, ambiversion, extroversion, some perhaps will never feel comfortable in asking questions of an external stranger audience, you know. So I think there's some other consideration.
Yeah. I think though for introverts, it's sometimes easier to do it here
Yes.
than, you know, in person.
Yeah.
So when I have in class, say had like, you know, a today's meet open or some kind of back channel chat available, all of a sudden an entirely different group of people are participating because that barrier to participate, and I don't, yeah, it's somehow different.
I agree with you. I think that the reason that I'm thinking so much about trying the external, because the internal audience partner, the authentic audience of me is easy.
Yeah.
I can do that on a regular basis. It's these other pieces when I want to try to connect to the bigger things that I have to work so much harder on. It's not valuable, but.
And I'm sure you are that, but I've seen a lot of teachers divert audience. Like they sort of devalue themselves already, and they say we need to get to the external audience, and they start they look less at their students' work. I've seen that in practice, where they're focused on that external audience, and they don't give us as much feedback, perhaps, in some cases. And it obviously sounds like you don't do that. I'm not.
No, I wasn't.
but I think when you're focused on writing for this particular audience, that something's happened. We've seen it amongst our teachers.
I would think that would even like devalue your students' work further because they wouldn't look to you as like the master of the craft anymore.
And then and if they can't connect with others and they're not connecting with you, then they're not getting any of it.
Yeah.
And I think again, as teachers, I think we have to be our number one teacher primary audience, like authentic audience. I think we're still authentic. It's just we're looking for another authentic audience. And I think just because by luck and circumstance that we happen to have these students, praise our particular class, we have to still see that we are their number one authentic audience. We don't think that way sometimes, or the conversation doesn't keep it that way.
Okay. Yeah, so I think another option though that like we haven't really touched on is that sometimes the audience can just be the student themselves. So like there's a lot of blogs that are created for a lot of classes, and the students will never touch them ever again. I did that plenty of times. And what we try to encourage now is that, yeah, so like you're turning this in for an assignment, you might not like this blog post, but there's going to be some that you do like, and you should kind of keep those like in mind and like eventually like build a portfolio or something like that, and so don't always think of it as you're just doing it for, the hashtag, or you're doing it for the teacher or something, but you're actually doing it for yourself at the end of the day. And I think that's like a nice something that we have to like remind students of, that like that's why they're getting this education too, is like it's for themselves.
Wendy, do you want to talk about digital portfolios at Shipley?
Oh, sure.
It seems like a great little segue.
Good point. So we are trying to get digital portfolios going as a school, and we have been using Google Sites, but have the students reflecting on their work and keeping it for their entire. We're a pre-K-12 school. So right now we're, I think, starting with the portfolios in like 3rd or 4th grade, and we have sort of a smattering of grades, and we will hopefully get all the way through. Right now it's like 3, 4, and 5, or 3 and 4, and 6 and 7, and 9 and 10, and so we'll close in the gaps. And our hope is that the audience there is, back here, as you were saying, of student, self, and maybe for the teacher. But really, we're asking the students to, with guidance, because they're students, to reflect on work or reflect on skills or process, so that as they move through the school, they will really have a record of, well, I said I really wanted to work on this, and be able to look back at some work. We're not really thinking of it as a showcase portfolio so much as a process portfolio.
I'm actually wondering why you're not using WordPress or something like that. I think it really lends itself to both showcase and process.
Yeah.
Partly because we use Google Apps, and that way we can sort of insert things for everybody so easily.
Right.
It seemed like it let us put in more different options. One of the things I want to be very aware of is not sort of having print and words typed be dominating them all the time. And
there is pretty good integration.
Yeah.
And I would say, and the portability down the road, especially if you want to look at students supporting it or moving it to somewhere else. And I'm not trying to say it's
Yeah, well, and that was sort of why we didn't start it for a long time, was like, well, this platform isn't perfect and this one doesn't let us do this. And so finally it was like, we have to just make a choice. Because I think the portability, we're not getting what we want out of that because it's apps read, like they won't be able to take it with them.
Yeah, but WordPress, really simple migration of it, and I've seen a number of other districts use it and be developmental and so on. And the process / performance piece or the showcasing piece is really nice.
Yeah.
So the tool does, the affordance does matter, right?
And so we have it, we wanted to sort of organize it by subject a little bit. So we have a little template and we have a little drop down menu for each thing so that we would see them organized in that way. So yeah, it was.
So take a photograph of your art project and what are the techniques that you use to make it? How did you feel, how did you feel about this project? I don't want to put too much up about the student because he says he doesn't like this picture, so. And it was the first one I grabbed, but.
Miriam?
I was just commenting on the idea of WordPress. So for one of my classes, we were also experimenting with Google Sites and a couple other platforms, and I found because I had already had another site on WordPress and I was comparing things and stuff like that. The thing with WordPress is, first of all, you can embed photos and
That's where my
and video and stuff like that. So it is possible to embed it and it will be on there just as much as with a Google site. But the other thing with WordPress, if anyone is also looking for a way to get like work seen, I feel like WordPress is better for that because I had a website on Blogger and it was getting like no shares or comments or anything like that. I moved it to WordPress. My first post got like 4 followers and a couple likes like within an hour, and I think a lot of that comes from the tag system in WordPress, so it's kind of its own search engine too.
Yeah, we actually didn't want these to be public, and that was a part of the reason. So we made some of the choices we did is that we had some restrictions school-wise in terms of what people were comfortable with sharing.
So
Not necessarily me, but.
So they're connecting elsewhere, but these portfolios aren't part of that piece that's connecting elsewhere.
They are not.
So they're an afterthought. Not an afterthought, not
Oh, I took it down. It was online. Sorry, I can pull another one up.
So the spaces where they get the comments aren't the portfolios.
No.
Okay.
No.
So you're taking artifacts from there and moving them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
The
they're
portfolio
taking
is
artifacts.
actually an example of themselves as the primary audience and their families that they want to share. Like, and that's on purpose, because it's something that we want them to have from 3rd through 12th grade. And if they decide they want something public in 3rd grade versus, and then, later on they hit 13 and they go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's up there. And
There are other districts that do it developmentally. So around middle years, you start to make decisions around that. And then by, say, grade 12 or something, you can, there's even the movement towards your own domain name. Which has been done in some spaces. And I think
I would have loved to be able to do that.
an interesting digital citizenship approach to it would be slowly developing because privacy is something that is developmental, and you make particular choices. And obviously, grade 3, I need a lot more information about what's going to happen. We all do. And even at grade 12, you may not make those decisions, but I think in the developmental process, and sometimes they slow sort of opening these particular spaces might be beneficial to a digital solution in the project.
If you're looking at WordPress, by the time he gets to be a senior, they're no longer too excited about that.
They can take it off. You can do that with Google.
Yeah. Move through and that's part of the decision-making process.
But even making certain posts private, certain are public, and even in grade 9, 10, whatever else. Oh, this one seems like a public one. This one's, I want to make this a private one.
Yeah, and I think we had some issues that we were not, as the tech coaches who were trying to push this forward, that we're not going to resolve in the way that we wanted necessarily. And so it was either like, you know what, this is not perfect, and we're going to move forward in this way because otherwise we're not going to move forward. So
I kind of
definitely,
what you just said, have a recording of it and then play it for administrators and saying, oh, guess what?
You can say sometimes I'll just say the same thing.
No, we have it on, the
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
Delete the part about the administrator.
Yeah, so there were some choices made in the effort of, let's get this started, and not continue to debate all of these options so that we can actually see if.
But we know nothing about private till grade 12, then all students will have, none of their work life in school is out there, but their maybe not so great Tumblr account is out there. So when we actually do this search, you get that rather than using school as a way to build positive credit. I think in the world you've hidden all the good things that you're doing, those things that you're doing in class, and you're left with the bad Twitter account, bad Tumblr account. So when you do a Google search, that's all you get. And even though there's other stuff behind closed doors that aren't easy. So I think that's in some ways that's your argument.
Yeah, and I will make that argument again.
I'm sure you have.
So as far as the how you were saying with digital citizenship, and with it showing up in like when you Google your name and stuff like that. Well, I think what one thing this teachers and students should be aware of is even the websites that aren't getting the comments and the engagement, if they're public, they're still going to show up in Google searches. So anything posted online, it's still out there though. So
Well, the
something to be
sites
aware
within
of.
the apps for ed, it doesn't search. They're not.
Well, yeah, you can make those so it's like only view in within a certain domain or with a certain login. But for people who are just making a website to show students work, like it's something to be aware of, that just because no one seems to be looking at it doesn't mean that someone hasn't seen it.
Sure. That's a good point. Yes.
So, well, first off, I think that like the fact that you're even trying to, get them thinking about these things in like K through 12 is amazing. Because by the time they get to college, then maybe they'll actually know what a digital identity is. Since I can explain that all the time.
Yeah, if they don't, I'm gonna be really mad.
Yeah, to
Tell me and I will
students.
comment.
But I kind of like the idea of like what you were saying, where maybe like, eventually you can start letting them become more public and like, but letting them choose whether or not they want to be public. So obviously you have to wait till they're 13 for most sites. And then, for other things, maybe 18 or something like that. So seniors in high school. And then, because, they're going to want to take things down, just kind of like we all wanted to take down our MySpaces. And so like that, but like even starting that conversation of what a digital identity is all the way back in 3rd grade is going to prepare them so much for the university level. Because like we have a domain of one's own project where like we give students each a free domain name, and like we constantly have to explain it to the freshmen because they haven't been brought up with that. And I don't know if it's because of that awkward like gap with millennials, Generation Z and whatnot, but yeah. So like, but with the portfolio, maybe you would want to flip it a little bit where the other stuff isn't that public because it's just the comments and posts and things like that, and it's more of like an exercise. But maybe if they want their portfolios to be public, that could be a more showcase thing, or you could even have both, have an archive and a showcase.
Right. Yeah, that would be great. I can't believe it's already 10:04. I'm like, look how few people there are. We made it. So I think we kind of talked this through. Seems like we really appreciate. We really appreciate you coming and staying. I hope you didn't feel guilted into it with so few people here, but we do appreciate. I know I have a lot of things to think about as well. Does anyone else want to say anything?
Just if you are a Philly teacher and you are looking to do this and you're struggling with timing, as you said before, there's a nonprofit in the area called Need Indeed. I don't know if you've heard of it before. It does service learning projects and helps involve community partners. And it can be something as small as like your students are just working on it inside of your classroom, but it's a great resource in the Philly area. So I can only help you Philly teachers. Sorry.
So thank you.
Thank you
for
guys.
coming. Enjoy what's left of your weekend, your commute or travels home. Safe travels.
Thank you. there's schedules. There's schedules for different schools.